Imagine you're sitting on a hiring committee.
Right. We've all been in that kind of high-pressure room.
Exactly. And you're staring across the table at a candidate who is just, absolute perfection.
The unicorn candidate.
Yes, the unicorn. They're fearless, they're charismatic, and they somehow have every single right answer to your most difficult, pressure testing questions.
So obviously you hire them.
Of course you do. You hire them on the spot thinking you just scored a generational rising star for your company.
But then reality sets in.
Right. Fast forward maybe 6 months. Your team is in total chaos. Morale has just plummeted, and the company is suddenly bleeding its top most reliable talent.
And you're left wondering what went wrong.
Exactly. What happened? Well, you didn't hire a bad fit. You hired a predator.
Oh, that's a chilling way to put it, but it's entirely accurate.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into the groundbreaking research from the book Snakes in Suits: When Psychopaths Go to Work.
Such an important piece of work.
It really is. Our mission today is to dissect exactly how that predator tricked your entire hiring committee, how they systematically dismantle companies from the inside out, and crucially, how you can spot them before they destroy your career.
Because to understand that level of corporate destruction, we really have to start by completely shattering our Hollywood-induced misconceptions of what a psychopath actually looks like.
Right, because when we hear the word, pop culture just points us straight toward violent criminals.
Exactly. We picture Hannibal Lecter or, the BTK killer. We expect them to look and act like overt monsters.
Honestly, we want them to have the decency to act overtly terrifying so we can just avoid them.
Right. That would be so much easier. But the reality that industrial psychologist Dr. Paul Babiak and criminal psychologist Dr. Robert D. Hare present in their analysis is, well, it's much more mundane.
Mundane, but dangerous.
Extremely. Because a large number of psychopaths, they just want power, money, or a really nice car.
And if you want those things, you don't become a serial killer.
No, you go into the corporate world.
Wow. Okay, so let's get into the numbers here, because this brings us to some pretty chilling statistics from Dr. Hare.
Right, and we should note that Hare is the creator of the PCL-R, which is the global gold standard for diagnosing psychopathy. So he brings decades of hard criminal justice data to Babiak's corporate data.
And what they found is that psychopaths make up only about 1% of the general population.
Yes, just 1%. Yet they commit over 50% of serious crimes.
Which is staggering.
Yep.
But then when Babiak and Hare looked at the corporate ladder, they found that psychopaths also occupy roughly 1% of senior corporate positions.
Right. It matches the general population rate, but concentrated at the top.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second, because 1% actually sounds incredibly low to me.
You think so?
I do. I think anyone who has spent, say, a decade in the corporate world feels like they had at least 5 terrible, abusive bosses.
That is a very fair point.
So are we sure that 1% number is accurate, or are we maybe just misdiagnosing terrible management?
That is a fantastic question, and it actually cuts to the core of why Babiak and Hare are so precise with their definitions. Because we throw terms around casually all the time.
Right, like calling a bad boss a sociopath.
Exactly, or calling an antisocial jerk a psychopath. But clinically speaking, they are not the same thing at all.
So break that down for us. What's the difference?
Well, let's start with antisocial personality disorder, or ESPD. That is a broad diagnostic category based mostly on behavioral norms.
Like what kind of behaviors?
Things like impulsivity, irritability, consistently failing to conform to rules. A terrible, toxic boss might have ASPD. They're reactive, they're difficult.
So ASPD is essentially defined by what you do, your outward behavior.
Precisely. Now, sociopathy is different. Sociopathy refers to patterns of behavior that society at large considers antisocial, but, and this is key, they are actually completely normal within the specific subculture that person grew up in.
Oh, interesting. So it's about context.
Exactly. A sociopath might possess a completely normal capacity for empathy and deep loyalty, but their sense of right and wrong is tied to their in-group.
Not the broader corporate handbook,
Right.
Which means they still have an internal moral compass. It's just, calibrated to a completely different true north.
That's a great way to put it. Yes. But psychopathy is an entirely different beast.
How so?
It includes deep-seated, unique personality traits that the other conditions just do not require.
Yeah.
A psychopath isn't shaped by a rough subculture or, a lack of management training.
Right.
They are fundamentally wired differently in how they process human emotion. They exhibit grandiosity, shallow emotions, and a profound clinical lack of empathy.
And the text outlines this fundamental wiring as the ABCs of psychopathy, which I thought was a brilliant framework.
It really is. It makes it so clear.
Right, and breaking these down really exposes why they are so dangerous in a business setting. So the A stands for no anxiety.
Yes, psychopaths simply do not experience the normal human physiological responses of fear or distress.
I mean, think about the implications of that in a boardroom.
It's massive. It allows them to take these huge bet-the-company risks
Yeah.
that would completely paralyze a normal executive.
Because they just don't feel the stress of it.
Exactly. And it also means they physically do not learn from punishment.
Wow. Wait, really?
Truly. A reprimand from HR, the threat of a lawsuit, or a terrible performance review, it means literally nothing to a nervous system that cannot process fear.
That is terrifying. Okay, so then we hit the B, which is no bonds.
Right. They are clinically incapable of forming genuine emotional attachments.
So how do they view people?
They view other human beings simply as objects to be used, much like, say, a carpenter views a hammer.
Wow. But they can fake it, right?
Oh, absolutely. They might simulate affection, loyalty, or even deep friendship, but you have to remember, it is purely a performance.
Designed to just extract value from you.
Exactly. Which leads us to the C, which is no conscience.
You know, I found the best way to visualize this lack of conscience is to think of a smartphone running on a completely different operating system.
Well, I like this. Tell me more.
Well, normal people have this massive battery-draining background app running at all times called Conscience.
Right.
And it slows down our ruthless decisions. It makes us hesitate. It makes us lose sleep worrying if we hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of processing power.
Exactly. But a psychopath has permanently deleted that app. They have 100% of their processing power dedicated strictly to achieving their goal, which just makes them terrifyingly efficient.
That is a perfect analogy. And Babiak and Hare actually categorize this unique operating system into 4 distinct domains.
Okay, let's go through those.
First is the interpersonal domain, where they manifest as superficial, deceitful, and grandiose.
Okay.
Second is the emotional domain, which highlights that deleted conscience app you mentioned. No empathy, no remorse.
Right.
Third is the lifestyle domain. This reveals them as impulsive, irresponsible, and parasitic.
Parasitic, meaning they feed off others.
Yes. And finally, the antisocial domain, showing a severe lack of behavioral control, often requiring them to constantly bend or break rules.
Okay, but if they are this ruthlessly wired, I mean, if they are deceitful, impulsive rule breakers who literally view coworkers as objects, how do they ever get past the first HR screening?
Great question.
Right, like how do they end up with the keys to the corner office?
To understand that, we have to look at the environment we've built. Modern organizations operate in this constant state of flux.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They value flexibility, high risk-taking, rapid change, disruption.
Disruption is the big buzzword.
Exactly. The authors call the corporate world a target-rich environment. These are the exact chaotic, high-stakes environments where a psychopathic personality actually thrives.
And the sources refer to this phenomenon as the leadership mirage, which is just fascinating.
It really is.
Because on the surface, a corporate psychopath looks exactly like the textbook definition of an ideal modern leader.
They really do. We constantly say we want executives who are confident, decisive, action-oriented, and unapologetic about taking big risks.
And a psychopath walks into an interview and effortlessly checks every single one of those boxes.
Effortlessly. But the mirage falls apart when you look at their underlying motivation.
Right, the why behind the behavior.
Yes. Effective, healthy leaders use those exact same skills, the charisma and decisiveness, to build organizations and develop the people around them.
Whereas the
Psychopaths use those skills exclusively to exploit organizations and destroy people. Like we mentioned in the lifestyle domain, they are parasitic.
They want the rewards without the work.
Exactly. They want to feed off the hard work, the ideas, and the success of others without ever doing the heavy lifting themselves.
And they're incredibly adept at camouflaging themselves to fit our expectations. The text makes a really fascinating point about how this intersects with gender norms, too.
Oh, yes. The camouflage adapts to the environment.
Right, so a female psychopath might weaponize the stereotype of being passive, warm, and nurturing to quietly extract secrets and manipulate everyone around her.
While a male psychopath might lean into the macho, intimidating, aggressively dominant stereotype to just bulldoze his way to the top.
It's terrifying because they don't arrive wearing a sign that says, I am here to ruin your life.
No, they hide perfectly inside the stereotypes and the costumes of success we already accept and look for.
So we have this camouflaged predator inside the building. The most valuable contribution of Snakes in Suits is that Babiak and Hare don't just warn us. They map out the exact playbook the psychopath uses to systematically take over.
Yes, the 5-phase model of psychopathic manipulation.
Let's walk through that because everyone needs to hear this. Phase 1 is entry.
Right. This is the interview stage,
Yeah.
where they use that superficial charm to get hired. And the authors actually note this is the most dangerous phase because detection is nearly impossible.
Because they don't have a track record at your company yet.
Exactly. And they know exactly what the hiring committee wants to hear.
But the real chilling calculation begins in phase 2, assessment.
Yes, the assessment phase.
Because once they are sitting at their desk, they aren't spending their first few weeks learning the software systems or reading the company mission statement.
Not at all. They are cold reading the entire office to map out the power dynamics.
I mean, think about the new VP who spends their first month doing nothing but asking to grab coffee with every single person on the floor.
Right. It looks like friendly networking.
But they are actually assessing vulnerabilities and categorizing the staff into specific archetypes. First, they look for the pawns.
The pawns. These are employees who have some informal influence, but are generally trusting and easily manipulated.
And the psychological vulnerability of the pawn is what psychologists call naive realism, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The pawn believes that everyone else sees the world with the same good intentions that they do.
So they simply cannot fathom that someone is sitting across from them at Starbucks calculating how to ruin their reputation.
It just doesn't compute for them. Next, the psychopath identifies the patrons.
The patrons, okay, who are they?
These are the people with formal power, the senior executives or board members. The psychopath charms them aggressively to use them as human shields.
And the patron falls victim to confirmation bias.
Right. And how confirmation bias works here is critical to understand.
Break that down for us.
Well, the patron is usually the one who advocated to hire the psychopath in the first place.
Ah, so their ego is tied to it.
Exactly. They want to believe they are a brilliant judge of character. So when the psychopath starts causing trouble, the patron's brain selectively ignores the red flags to protect their own ego.
They tell themselves, oh, he just has sharp elbows, or she's just a real go-getter.
Yep, they justify it completely.
And then, tragically, they identified the patsies, the honest fall guys.
The psychology of the patsy is absolutely heartbreaking.
It really is. Because they are often the most diligent, trusting people in the room, but they're blinded by the fundamental attribution error.
Right, and what that means is our brains are hardwired to assume other people operate with the same basic moral software we do.
Going back to that conscience app.
Exactly. So when the Patsy's project gets sabotaged, their brain literally cannot process the concept of, my coworker did this purely for sport.
So instead of pointing the finger at the psychopath, what do?
The Patsy blames the internal process. Or worse, they blame themselves.
Ah, that's awful.
Yeah.
And orbiting all of this are the enablers.
The enablers, yes. These are the bystanders who see the manipulation happening, but suffer from the bystander effect.
They just keep their heads down and stay quiet to protect their own paychecks.
Exactly. And once this entire board is set, the psychopath moves to phase 3, manipulation.
This is where they manufacture what the authors call psychopathic drama.
They don't just manipulate one-on-one, they manipulate the entire network.
Right, they start with love bombing.
Showering a target with intense flattery and mirrored interests to build this false sense of deep intimacy.
And once the target trusts them, they pivot to triangulation and divide and conquer.
Well, let's paint a picture of how triangulation works in a typical office.
Please do.
The psychopath goes to an employee, let's call her Sarah, and says, hey, John isn't pulling his weight on the marketing campaign, but please don't tell him I said that. I'm just venting to you because I trust you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, they walk straight over to John's desk and say, hey, just a heads up, Sarah has been quietly gunning for your job.
That is so toxic.
By the end of the week, Sarah and John despise each other. They refuse to collaborate, and the psychopath is somehow the trusted confidant to both of them.
It is masterful, toxic engineering, and they combine this with gaslighting, making their victims question their own memory of conversations and their own sanity.
But eventually, this web gets too complex.
Right. The lies have to start bumping into each other.
And they do, which triggers phase 4, confrontation.
So what happens when they finally get caught?
When colleagues finally notice the inconsistencies and confront the psychopath, we see the no anxiety and no conscience traits in full force.
Because a normal person caught in a huge lie would feel shame. They'd apologize.
Right, but the psychopath deflects, denies everything, and expertly plays the victim.
And this is where that mapping from phase 2 pays off, right?
Exactly. When confronted, they immediately run behind their powerful patrons for cover.
Claiming they're being bullied while aggressively blaming the patsies for all the departmental failures.
And because the patron's confirmation bias is so strong, they protect the psychopath.
Which inevitably leads to phase 5, ascension.
Yes. The psychopath is actually promoted.
It's infuriating.
They successfully neutralize their enemies, gain more formal power, and the entire 5-phase cycle restarts on a larger scale.
Leaving an absolute trail of wreckage in their wake. And, we really have to talk about that wreckage.
We do.
Because knowing this 5-phase playbook is deeply unsettling, but it's completely useless unless you know how to build a defense against it. The devastation they leave behind isn't just financial, though obviously the fraud, the legal liabilities, and the turnover costs are massive.
The human cost is profound.
Yes, the human cost.
It's often irreparable. Employees working under a corporate psychopath report severe anxiety, clinical depression, severe burnout, and a complete shattering of their professional confidence.
Because the psychopath entirely destroys team cohesion and institutional trust.
It can take years for a department to recover psychologically from just one person.
So, how do we spot the predator before the venom sets in? What are the actual warning signs that you are dealing with a snake in a suit?
You have to look closely for the cracks in the mask. The first sign is excessive charm that feels just a little too good to be true.
Like it feels rehearsed.
Yes, it's highly calibrated flattery. A second major warning sign is a consistent, aggressive pattern of taking credit for other people's work while immediately shifting the blame for any failure.
That happens so much. And the sources also talk about paying attention to the shallow effect.
Yes, that is a huge one.
It's that unsettling sense that they are performing an emotion rather than actually feeling it.
Because they have to manually select their emotional response.
Right. If someone shares tragic personal news, a normal person feels empathy instinctively. But a psychopath has to manually select the sad face response.
They might mimic a sympathetic frown and say all the right words, but if you look at their eyes, there is nothing there. It's dead.
Another crucial relational warning sign is a trail of destroyed relationships.
Yes, they tend to leave previous organizations and personal relationships, for that matter, in absolute chaos.
So, to help identify this systematically before they get hired, Babiak and Hare adapted the criminal PCL-R checklist into a specialized tool for the corporate world, right?
They did. It's called the B-scan, or business scan.
And the brilliance of the B-scan is that they stripped out the items that simply wouldn't apply in a corporate setting.
Like a history of violent crime or juvenile delinquency.
Right, because HR isn't screening for that anyway. Instead, they focus strictly on those destructive interpersonal and lifestyle traits.
The manipulation, the grandiosity, the pathological deceit.
It allows organizations to assess potential hires based on their emotional functioning and interpersonal style, rather than just being dazzled by a resume.
And the authors argue that strong organizational defense relies on structured, heavily standardized interviews where charm just can't sway the outcome.
Right. It requires rigorous, deep-dive background checks, actively protecting whistleblowers, and above all, creating a culture that values ethical integrity over short-term financial results at any cost. Okay, I have to stop you there, though.
Sure.
Because it's incredibly easy to say a Fortune 500 company should completely overhaul its culture and mandate the B-scan.
True.
But what if you, the listener, are sitting in a cubicle right now listening to this and realizing with a sinking feeling that your manager is squarely in phase 3 of this playbook?
That is a terrifying realization.
Right. You can't wait for a corporate cultural overhaul. What is the immediate individual survival strategy?
That is the most urgent reality of this research. If you find yourselves in the blast radius today, the book outlines very specific, highly tactical individual defenses.
Okay, what's step 1?
First and foremost, trust your instincts. If something feels fundamentally wrong, manipulative, or hollow about an interaction, do not let their charm talk you out of your own reality.
You have to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Your brain is trying to apply the fundamental attribution error to them, assuming they mean well. Stop doing that.
Exactly that. Just stop. Second, Relentlessly document everything.
Everything.
Keep rigorous, time-stamped records of every single interaction, every promise made, every directive given.
Because psychopaths thrive in the ambiguity of verbal agreements and hallway conversations.
Yes. Force them into the light with meticulous paper trails.
Because when phase 4 confrontation inevitably happens and they try to gaslight you or blame you for a failed project, you aren't fighting their charisma with your memory.
No, you are fighting their charisma with receipts.
I love that. Receipts always win. Okay, what's the third defense?
Third, strictly maintain your boundaries. Do not share personal vulnerabilities, complaints about the company, or your career anxieties with them.
Because they'll just file that information away and use it as ammunition later.
Exactly. Keep the relationship coldly professional.
And fourth, I imagine, is realizing you cannot fight them alone.
You must build alliances. The psychopath's favorite tactic, as we discussed with triangulation, is divide and conquer.
Right. They desperately want to isolate you.
So you have to maintain strong, transparent, constant communication with trusted colleagues so you aren't fighting in a vacuum. Check their stories with other people.
Wow. So, synthesizing all of this, the core message of Snakes in Suits isn't some utopian promise that you can wave a magic wand and banish psychopaths from the workplace forever.
Unfortunately, no.
It's a call for extreme educated vigilance. The predator in the corner office is real, and their entire strategy relies on your blindness. But by understanding their underlying wiring, recognizing the leadership mirage, and memorizing their 5-phase playbook, you take away their single greatest weapon, the element of surprise.
And that leads to a profound sense of empowerment, because these individuals are not invincible.
Right.
Their power is entirely reliant on the pawns trusting them, the patrons protecting them, and the enablers staying quiet.
So when you understand the psychology of corporate predation, you effectively refuse to play your assigned role in their drama.
Exactly. You break the cycle.
Which leaves us with a fascinating, entirely new thread to unravel as we wrap up today's deep dive.
So where are we going with this?
Well, we've talked extensively about how these snakes in suits use in-person charm, intense eye contact, and physical presence to dominate a boardroom and manipulate their targets.
Right.
But look at the corporate landscape we're moving into right now. In an era of infinite remote work, asynchronous Slack channels, and perfectly polished AI-generated emails. How does the corporate psychopath adapt?
That is a brilliant question.
Without the physical water cooler to corner their pawns, or the boardroom to charm their patrons, does this digital distance make them easier to spot because their interpersonal weapon is muted? Or does the screen provide the ultimate mask, stripping away those micro-expressions of shallow effect and making their camouflage completely perfect?
Oh, that is chilling.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you get a highly flattering yet oddly calculated message on Teams. Remember that perfectly jagged white line on an X-ray we wish we could rely on to diagnose a problem?
Yeah.
The corporate world doesn't have one. It's on you to look past the suit and see what's really sitting across the table.